Welcome to the third video for Chapter 3 and the last one for this chapter. We left off in the last video talking about biogeochemical cycles, specifically the nitrogen cycle. And so now I want to go over fixed NAD and ANPAN. This is a way to help you remember the steps of the nitrogen cycle and the products. So first we have fix, which is your short for nitrogen fixation. And in nitrogen fixation, nitrogen gas is taken from the atmosphere and it is fixed into ammonium. Then the next step is nitrification, in which ammonium is converted into nitrate. Then you have assimilation into the food web. So now it's part of the food web. And so it's part of the food web. Sorry about that. I had to pause. And then we have ammonification. So you have your protein turned back into ammonium. And then we have denitrification, which will take that ammonium and make it nitrogen gas back to the atmosphere if there's no oxygen present, if it's in anaerobic conditions. ANPAN is the words that, or the products of these things. So this is ammonium, nitrate, protein, back to ammonium, and then nitrogen gas. So basically, nitrogen gas goes through fixation and makes ammonium. Ammonium goes through nitrification and makes nitrate. Nitrate goes through assimilation and becomes protein in the food web. When the protein, when it's discarded through waste or it is decomposed after death, it goes through ammonification again and becomes ammonium. And then this ammonium here can either go back around and go through nitrification again and become nitrate, or if there is no oxygen present, it can go through denitrification and become nitrogen gas. And then this nitrogen gas can go around and back into nitrogen fixation. So this is just kind of a cheat to help you remember the steps and the products to each. So hopefully we'll go over this in class and hopefully that will help you. Here's a very complicated drawing, of course, of the nitrogen cycle. One of the big things you have to remember is bacteria, bacteria, bacteria. They are very, very important in 4 of the 5 steps in the nitrogen cycle. The only 6th step that does not require bacteria would be assimilation into the food web. All others require bacteria, and very specialized bacteria. They do a very specialized role. Here's a slightly more simplified, or maybe a slightly more simplified, I'm not so sure, nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycle is very, very complex, probably as long as you remember the fixed NAD and ANPAN very, very, very well. That should be sufficient. But there are a few other things you need to know, of course, is the human impact. Nitrogen is produced, nitrous oxide, is produced when we burn fossil fuels, and then that is converted when combined with water and oxygenation in our atmosphere can become nitric acid, which is a component not only of acid deposition or acid rain, but also smog formation. N2O is a greenhouse gas, and it's produced from animal waste, livestock waste, and also commercial fertilizers. And of course, increased gas means increased temperatures around our planet, or potentially increased temperatures. Nitrogen is also removed from an ecosystem when plants are removed. So a lot of our nitrogen we are using for agriculture because we remove the crop from the ground and we ship it out to be eaten. And there's no plant material or there's no natural fertilizers that's getting decomposed to replenish that nitrogen in the ground. So we have to bring in artificial fertilizers that are made man-made, and supplement the next crop and stuff. Where in nature, when a plant dies, it dies right there where it lived, and therefore that material that nitrogen is recycled. It's decomposed into the ground for the next plant that arrives there. Also, nitrogen runoff is a huge issue in aquatic ecosystems. Again, nitrogen is number 2 limiting factor in aquatic ecosystems. So if you add a lot of nitrogen in the form of agricultural runoff due to either animal waste or runoff of fertilizers, it will result in a condition called eutrophication. Eutrophication is a serious condition. It makes lakes green. Almost every lake in Florida is eutrophic. It's basically sick. And now all that extra nutrients is cycling through the lake and you really can't get rid of it. You get these green slimy lakes, and you'll learn all about eutrophication when we get to water pollution much later in the year. But if you have any questions about it, please let me know. Okay, so that is nitrogen cycle really quickly. We will be going over the nitrogen cycle in class because it is hugely important. Okay, so the phosphorus cycle. The phosphorus cycle, you do not need to know the cycle, but you need to know a few things about it. First, we need phosphorus for our DNA and RNA. It is a limiting factor. It's second to nitrogen in terrestrial ecosystems. It's the number 1 limiting factor in aquatic ecosystems. So it's a very big thing. The one thing you have got to remember, because I guarantee this is almost always a multiple choice question on your AP exam, is that there is no gaseous stage of the nitrogen or phosphorus cycle. It can be in the atmosphere, but it's in the atmosphere as dust. It's found in the dirt, and it's found in plants and animals, and it's found in water, but it's not found as a gas. That's a very big one. Phosphate mines are another big thing. We dig up a lot of phosphate for fertilizers and detergents. We used to use a lot of fertilizer or a lot of phosphorus in detergents, your soap and your laundry soap and that kind of thing. They got our whites very, very white. Your grandma liked it a lot. But we found out it was doing lots of damage because, of course, that phosphorus would be dumped out in the water from our houses and was getting into the environment. Okay, so the steps of the phosphorus cycle, which you really kind of need to know, but it's not a big deal. Rock is weathered, broken down, which releases the phosphorus so that producers can use it, or it releases it into the water so producers in the aquatic environment can use it. It's transferred through the food web to consumers, and then of course when consumers and producers decompose, it's released back to the ground. Just so you know, guano, which is feces from fish or from bats, is very, very high in phosphorus. Very high in phosphorus. The store for phosphorus cycle, where is most phosphorus? It's in the rock and biomass. It's in us. It's insoluble, or insoluble rock on the ocean floor is a phosphorus sink. And humans are impacting it mostly because of needing it for fertilizers. So our phosphorus mines have a lot of runoff pollution from them. It's being introduced into our ecosystem by fertilizers and getting into the aquatic environment, again leading to eutrophication. In serious cases, eutrophication can also lead into large dead zones where basically the oxygen level is so low that plants or animals cannot exist. We have a very large dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico where the Mississippi River dumps in. And also, again, anytime you remove vegetation from an area like in agriculture, you're reducing the levels of phosphorus in the ecosystem because you're removing those plants, so they're taking the phosphorus. So then you have an increased need for synthetic fertilizers, man-made fertilizers. So a little drawing of the phosphorus cycle. I'm not going to worry about that. Biggest thing, stored in rocks, not in the atmosphere, no gaseous cycle. And then also excess causes eutrophication in lakes. Those are the biggies. Sulfur, again, not a lot you need to know. It's a component of protein, so we need it. It's stored in rocks. Basically, again, being released due to weathering of the rock or volcanic activity. It's absorbed by your producers and transferred to consumers, and then, of course, released during decomposition. Sulfur is a big concern because it is the #1 source of acid rain or acid deposition. So it's coming from the burning primarily of coal. All your fossil fuels have it, but coal has a lot of it. And since most of our electricity comes from coal burning power plants, it can be a huge thing. Refining of petroleum or smelting of metal can also release sulfur. And again, your coal mining again is a very big deal. Sulfur dioxide actually works to cool the planet. It actually blocks UV radiation. But again, we don't necessarily still want to put it in the air because it can also react with water and make acid deposition. And all of our rain now is basically acidic. So that's not a good thing. Okay, moving on. Disturbances. Last little things for this chapter, just some odd things. Disturbances, these can be all kinds of things, anything that affects the environment or the biology or organisms in an area. There's natural disturbances, and then of course there's anthropocentric, I can't talk today, which are man-made. Your natural are things like your hurricanes, volcanoes, forest fires, those tornadoes, that kind of thing. Anthropocentric is your agriculture, mountaintop removal for coal, pollution, human settlements, those kind of things. So if you have a disturbance, we basically look at the resistance and the resilience of an ecosystem based on these things. Resistance is your resistance to change. So if the hurricane comes through and the ecosystem really doesn't change much, that's resistance. Resilience is how quickly it goes back to normal. If you have a volcanic eruption, how long does it take the forest to grow back? That is your resilience, how long it takes it to come back. Okay, so almost done. The intermediate disturbance hypothesis basically says that disturbances are good. They actually help keep the number of species in the area here rather high. Because if you get over here where there's less disturbance, your very dominant species, the ones that can outcompete everybody, they get real high in number, but there's not a lot of species. If you're over here with very frequent disturbances, nothing can grow. So kind of here in the middle is where you end up with the best biodiversity, the highest number of species, when there's an occasional disturbance. It's not very frequently, and it depends on the habitat, but every few, about 10 to 20 years, there should be a little disturbance in the area, and it opens up areas for less competitive species to still exist and stuff. So that's what intermediate disturbance hypothesis basically says. One last thing for this unit, and that is ecosystem services. Ecosystem services is a big thing. It was a big thing on the AP exam last year, and there was a lot of discussion about this. An ecosystem service should be anything the ecosystem does, but in fact, we consider it to be anything the ecosystem does that benefits us, that benefits human. So the big one I always think of is pollination. Most of our agricultural crops are pollinated by bees and other insects in the area. And so we don't have to worry about it. They'll pollinate our fruits and stuff, and we don't have to worry about it. This saves us billions and billions and billions of dollars and makes our fruit much cheaper. If we had to try to go around and pollinate, we would have a problem. So pollination by insects is a very big one. Lumber, we get lots of trees. Nature will grow us trees quite well for us. If you go out in the nature and collect mushrooms, that would be one. Nuts and fruits from trees out in the wild. Pest control. Mosquito fish actually eat mosquito larvae, and they help with pest control. A lot of organisms eat other organisms. Ladybugs eat aphids. You could use those. A lot of our furs are obtained from wild animals. So anything like this, fish in the ocean is an ecosystem service. Plants clean the air and water we drink, and that's an ecosystem service. So anything nature does for us for free or provides to us is considered an ecosystem service.